If you ever played Magic the Gathering or still play and look at the Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and probably you would think to yourself, how is it that people can play this game, even though it's probably so complicated at this point. But on the other hand, if you're a Yu-Gi-Oh player and recently in Magic, you probably don't like how you basically have to start resources and have just one card combo that makes your entire board. But in this video, as a player who played both Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh, I want to talk about their main differences, except the obvious one, resource management, of why Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh are so very different games. And first things first, which is probably the most important thing in these both games, I want to talk about how these two games handle the draw power potential in the current meta games. And let's look at Yu-Gi-Oh first, because that is kind of interesting of how it might get its draw potential. First of all, let's get the elephant in the room out of the way. Pot of Greed, a generic card that if you just play it allows you to play no playable, draw 2 cards, no nothing, no life point gains, no discarding cards. You just basically play it, and it's not even once per turn, so if you draw other copies of Power Grid, you can just use them right away. Nothing stopping you from using Pot of Greed, if you do draw it on your first turn. And this is where for Yu-Gi-Oh! It kind of breaks the game, because, as I said, in Yu-Gi-Oh! There's no resource management, so if you fulfill card's requirements, you can just use the card. You don't have to wait anything, you don't have to, for example, wait the next turn to use it, you can just use it straight away. So that's why Pot of Greed is essentially bad, because it just allows you to generate too much advantage way too easily without essentially nothing stopping it from giving you that advantage. While in Magic, basically, because you are locked down to resource management, the cards in that game can be a bit more busted if you consider Yu-Gi-Oh standard, and basically can allow you to draw a bunch of cards with the limitation that you won't be able to use them in the current turn. Example, Gryce Solar Brand. I'm not sure if I pronounced his name right. But the thing you need to know about this guy is essentially he's an 8 mana creature with 7/7 lifing and flying. And his main special ability, or his ability overall, essentially you can pay 7 life to draw 7 cards. Yes, you heard that correctly. He can draw you 7 cards if you pay 7 life. Now, this card is essentially balanced around the fact that you'll be able to use them in the late game or to mid game if you have essentially good generating mana deck, where it essentially allows you to play him earlier. But to surprise to some people, he doesn't see as much competitive play. I mean, he does see a bunch of competitive play, but it's not as much as you would consider him to be a busted card. Like, as far as I have seen some deck lists for Magic, he's not in every dark mana deck. Like, not every single dark mana deck or such any hybrid dark mana decks use this card. I mean, I did see a bunch of that using, but not every single one that they use, that's completely different if you talk about Yu-Gi-Oh standards. Now, in the Yu-Gi-Oh, there's cards like Chicken Game, where it essentially allows you to draw 1 card if you pay 1000 life points, and either player can use it, and it's currently banned. Yes, you heard that correctly, a card that can only draw you 1 card by paying 1000 life points is banned. And mainly because it's banned is because it was just too splashable to other decks. Like if you had 3 copies of Chicken Game, you can just use them right away, draw your 3 card, essentially make your entire deck going from 40 card deck to 37 card deck. While Gilgabrand was also a good card, and probably still is a good card in Magic. He's not always used because it's kind of hard to get him out, and also there's just so many creature removal in the game that although yes he is good, but the chances are your opponent's going to find around it. While if you think about the Chicken Game, although yes there are ways around it, but if your opponent starts first with a Chicken Game, there's nothing really you can do about it. Maybe unless you have a hand trap or something. But if your opponent goes first, I have no hand traps, no spell removal, he's just going to be able to go off with his own combos. While in Magic, around the time you would use like Gilgabrand, your opponent might have something saved up because essentially the game would have gone on for so long. So you might have something prepared for that card. And also for the further comparison, I could talk about Kotoke Heat Soul, where technically the closest thing I can compare Gilgabrand to in Yu-Gi-Oh! Standards. And Kotoke Heat Soul's main ability is once per turn, quick effect, you can pay 1000 life points to draw 1 card. He's a link free Cyber's Fire monster, and is currently, as I last time checked, he sees a bunch of play in OCG. But I'm not sure how much he will see play in the TCG, considering he's a link free. But other things like that are just crazy that I can just pull out. For example, rituals, we can just pull out 2 King's Calamities before he got banned. So, who's to say that if their deck requires some draw, they might just well pull in Kotoke Heat Soul for some extra draws? Who say that is not possible? And considering that this guy's going to be an extra deck, where essentially you won't have to search him for your main deck, and it does require 2 different Cybers monsters with different attributes, but this means there's a bunch of Cybers monsters that you see around in the meta play, and also how generic this is +1 potential, I am fully expecting this card to come in banless in some way, shape or form. Maybe to semi-limited, limited maybe if it does see that huge amount of play once it comes to TCG, because I have seen in OCG how it has actually seen play with access code talker. There's many in that game essentially starting to see a bunch of competitive play as a general. So it would not be surprised if Heat Soul might have been essentially pushed sideways for that tier. Not so much a tier 1, but maybe some of a rogue strategy. Or like Grisel Band, where essentially he's balanced around essentially that you only be able to use him at mid game, essentially as a comeback resource. He's essentially allowed to run around. Because for the most part, if you draw this card in the first turn, then you won't be able to use him. You're going to have to essentially wait for the mid to end game essentially to use him for maybe kind of a comeback, while end ball's actually going to be set up. And which brings me to another point, where essentially end balls resource by their draw power. While in Magic it does require a bunch of turns for the end ball to be set up, in Yu-Gi-Oh! You can basically just have your end ball set up in your first turn. And then generally, it is harder to pick Yu-Gi-Oh! Boards as it is to Magic boards, because the monsters might have some kind of protection, negate, or either floating event where they essentially fall into something else or they give you additional more draw cards so you can follow up on your next turn. While in Magic, it's kind of easier to actually break the board, as not many monsters do have some kind of protection, not many monsters can't really negate anything. And also, as far as I understand, none of the monsters or creatures in that game can actually fall into something else to replace it. But they do might have a figure essentially they can sacrifice themselves to deal damage to you or to your creatures, but they don't really have anything to Yugioh so they can actually just float in something else. But it's not to say that Magic has never banned a card that would essentially allow you to generate too much advantage, especially Skull Clamp, which I'm not sure if I pronounced that card also right, apologies if I didn't. But essentially it allows you to generate 2 cards for just 1 mana, and this card mostly so plays in aggro, as aggro that will overwhelm you with a bunch of small creatures. So essentially a card that would just allow you to draw +2 out of 1 mana. It didn't really seem that bad of a deal to them. But anyway, that's going to be it for today's video, or the first video of Magic vs Yu-Gi-Oh! Why they're so different. If you have any more questions, then let me know in the comments below and I'll try to answer them as best as I can. Anyway, have a great one everyone, and I'll see you guys next time.